Okay, so we are TEL discussion group B with module 9. I'm just going to discuss the discussion prompts real quick. One is consider how Hall and Horde and the reading of stages of concern, and discuss several ways you might use stages of concern in your research and in your practice. And the other is to identify two key concepts from your reading on correlation and discuss them. So obviously we're not writing them, so we'll just be discussing them today. Sahar, if you want to start.
Sure. So the stages of concerns, I have a little bit of a hard time understanding them just for the reading. So I watched the video. I think the video was such a nice way to break it down because when I read it, I didn't connect it to user concerns. So, with these stages, stages 1 being unconcerned, informational, personal, and so forth, several ways that I might be able to use them in my practice is with the ways I design my survey. So I think it's important to, understand what each one of these break down to and mean to the users and to the students, and I think it's important that they know that we understand the stages of concerns and we understand what they're saying and going from there. The one thing that I really thought was interesting from the video is that these stages of concerns, when you transfer them into your survey, you as the person doing your POP and researching, the researcher that we are becoming, we're understanding the consumer or the student's concerns. And we're learning this by a survey and a numerical survey, which I think is really important because we can see how much of a concern that this is to the students. And this is a way to access people's feelings and reactions about, the new program or practice that we're going to put into play.
Yeah, definitely. I think I saw it the same way, and I agree. It was a little difficult at first to understand, but then when what I thought was really helpful though was when I stopped looking at the stages of concern and started to look at kind of the 4 bins that they fit into, right? Unrelated, self, task, and impact, and the way that those patterns kind of fit in, or I should say the way that the stages fit into the patterns. So thinking about my own experience, and just recently we had our college day, which is an opportunity for us to talk about, each vice president to talk about our work stream, what we're working on over this year. So my campus-wide goal is access, affordability, and admissions. So ways to grow enrollment. And I think what was interesting was that you can almost mentally check off each of the stages as we're starting to talk about it, right? Like nobody else thinks enrollment's their issue, or those that do know that it is, but they don't know what to do about it, right? Or if we don't grow enrollment, well, what does that mean for the college and for me as an employee of the college, right? Like it starts to really cascade out. And now suddenly we're at the point where, okay, we need to come together and put something pen to paper and start to work, right? That's that impact pattern. So I think that, like, especially for us on the higher ed side, I think we're so used to, in a sense, action research and things that we do anyway. But I think being able to see it as an iterative process through the stages of concern, I think is something that's really interesting.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought up higher ed in the admissions process, because I feel like with admissions, you go from 0 to 6 real quick. The middle portion is actually just like stage 0 for us. Like everything is like clumped, and then we're like, okay, what are ideas? Let's put them into practice and go from there. With higher ed, like you said, students impact so much when it comes to not only financials, but like the university itself. When it comes to accreditation and all these things. So our stages of concerns move so fast, and just like you with my POP, when I brought up the issue of diversity to our leadership team, it was fast moving. It was like, okay, well, what are your ideas? What do you want to do? Like, how are you going to tackle this? And these are questions that I feel like with your experience, you're able to address them, because you can think about situations and how other stages of concerns you went through helped you with that. So
yeah, and I think especially for yourself, right? Because you're at a school pharmacy, right? And trying to tackle diversity in specialized medical programs is sometimes very difficult, right? Like I'm looking at a university-wide system of trying to bring trying to improve diversity in all its factions, not just ethnic diversity. But I think it has to be even more difficult for for like a pharmacy school that, traditionally might have brought in a specific type of student, and now you're trying to kind of expand your reach. And it's, do we create the culture and more people will come, or do we get more people and then we can create the culture, right? And that really is a little bit of a chicken and egg issue sometimes. But yeah, I think clearly stages of concern works for both of what we're trying to do with our own institutions. So
Yeah,
cool.
I agree.
All right, so we want to just move on. We'll talk about correlational designs or correlational studies and all of that.
Yeah, we can do that. So I think, Mike, we were talking about how we were kind of looking at both explanatory and the prediction design. So if you want, you can lead this one, and I'll just fill in some of my notes on that.
Yeah, so I think for me, so explanatory, which is, where we're looking at two variables, and where changes in one variable can affect the other. I mean, thinking about my problem of practice, which is all about interdepartmental communication, but it's about not only how does it affect it, but what can we do to scale it, up and to really grow interdepartmental communication. So I think, like, when I'm thinking about an explanatory design, I'm kind of checking the boxes of, okay, well, could it have two or more variables? Yes. Will it collect all the data and analyze all the participants in one group? Yes, right. Like, how does one little thing affect another thing? Not from a cause and effect, but how are they connected together? What's the relationship between the variables? So for me, explanatory design made a lot of sense, because I'm trying to explain the association between those two variables.
And I agree, especially when I was kind of a little bit torn with explanatory. Think, will it work well with my POP? Will there be issues? And the only reason why I thought about this is one of the ways to identify explanatory design is that the researchers collect data from at one point of time. And so it says, in the text that evidence for this procedure will be found in administration of instruments in one sitting to students. And that the researchers are not interested in either the past or future performance of participants. So past performance, because of our diversity rates being so low, I don't think that it's going to be an issue. But then, thinking about the future performance kind of throws me off, because as you mentioned earlier, are we going to create a culture of diversity, or are we going to bring students to create that for us? Like, are our students going to be the change agents? And, that's future thinking. And I think one of the best ways to tackle this is to bring in those students who learn, how they can bring in those experiences and, their diversity and how it enriches our education, and then go from there. So I can see myself using the explanatory design to a certain extent. And I can see how the two variables do correlate with each other, and how one can affect the next result. So I do see that. I just think that I might run into some issues with that.
Yeah, and I think to just turn quickly to kind of the prediction design, I think what was interesting about that, I kind of used the example that they had of Royal and Rossi. They were concerned about teacher isolation, and they wanted to identify the factors that they could predict a better sense of community, right? So from the predictive design perspective, I think what's interesting is, I think both of us to a certain degree are trying to do that, right? Like, how can we, for you, and I'm going to overgeneralize your pop, right? Take students that traditionally would not have enrolled at SCAGs, right? And bring them into the fold, and not only bring them into the application process, but more importantly, bring them into the yield/enrollment process, right? Like, that's the main thing, right? Because you can bring as many students through, but it's about yielding those students, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, just as a fellow enrollment manager, I think money always plays a part in everything, but I think it's also about the culture that the student feels is created from an outsider's point of view, right? So
Absolutely.
I think that's where, at least for you, I think that's where it plays in. I think for me, what I'm trying to do is determine a couple things. What's creating this lack of communication, and then what can we do to improve it, and then can we put structures in place that, regardless of the people,
Hmm.
right, whether it's through technology or whether it's through policy or procedure, how can we ensure that whoever is in those positions will be able to lockstep, be right in place with the way everyone else is, and then how can we ensure that that then improves the student retention, for lack of a better term, you know?
Yeah. And communication is integral to anything, and I feel like, what you're saying to me regarding like whoever fills that spot, should just pick up, the best practices. And sometimes I feel like even if there was something as simple as like a knowledge base, like a hub where someone can just like log into, like, for example, if it's an advisor who has a question about a business policy, just something that they can, as easy as a canvas, right? Like, that's just so streamlined for everyone to stay up to date on communications. And, at my previous university, they wanted to do something similar to this, but, obviously I'm not sure how the outcome of that is now. But, streamlined processes are easier said than done. And and I, being a previous trainer in student policy and stuff like that, we can state these things, we can teach you these things, but it really comes from like the culture of your department, going back to media practice versus groups, right? So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think and especially because enrollment management for us is such a reactive profession sometimes, right? Especially now, right? I mean, everybody's freaking out and worried about getting their enrollment numbers, and the top of that funnel with the number of inquiries and prospects you have. If you're not 30% more than you were last year, you're not even going to get close to what you had this year. So I think it's really interesting, but two, I think really interesting designs that I think either one of them could be useful for us. So
no, absolutely. And I could see myself utilizing the prediction design more than explanatory, because, like you, there's so much in admissions that we have to predict regardless. I mean, everything is a prediction, right? Every task that we're given, they do, where's our projections? Our projections are our predictions. So even
yeah,
with my designs, I've always get asked the question, well, how will this play out in the next 5 to 10 years? Or what can you do different for this for the next application cycle? So there's a lot of forward thinking that I think production design will help us in.
perfect, cool. All right, I think we'll leave it at that then.
All
All
right.
right, sounds good.
All right.